Greetings and welcome to DWP 2022 season. We're in episode 3 today. The theme for the whole season is whoever controls Africa runs the world. In Africa that controls Africa will be the next superpower after the US and China. In today's episode, we'll ask the question, who is Africa's real partner or partners? Who needs who, really? And like before in our sessions, we break it up into 3 segments. In the first segments, we try to go through the facts. Then the second segment, we analyze the facts, interpret, and look at what others' views are. And then we go into the third segment where we look at the conclusions and departure points. So who needs who? And who is Africa's real partners? So in the last episode, we actually shared facts on why and how the global system is designed to keep Africans poor, keep them away from manufacturing, so that Africa becomes the supplier of cheap raw materials to the industrialized world, and at the same time as consumers of foreign manufactured goods. This is where they want to keep Africa. And they have to ensure that Africa remains incapable of manufacturing at a meaningful level, so that Africa cannot manufacture its own raw materials, whilst the raw materials are siphoned elsewhere for manufacturing. Why? Once again, because they want to continue ruling the world for another 1,000 years if they can. And so far, we've agreed, they've achieved these through three scrambles for Africa. And right now, as we speak, we're in the third one, which is the more benign one. The first was through colonization. The second, through the Cold War. Now, they do it through a stroke of the pen, getting Africa to sign ridiculous agreements. So the third scramble we agreed in the last session is one that Africa can win, should win as soon as possible. So let's go through the facts when it comes to who are the real partners of Africa. Fact number 1 is that Africa is no true partner and is not likely to get one, actually, as long as Africa is an underdog. No one partners with an underdog. Trevor Noah, a comedian, puts it much better than scholars and academics like myself. He actually goes straight and calls a spade and puts it more clearly. Watch his video on this particular topic. I mean, he answers our question today, who needs who, and who is Africa's real partner. And, he uses the example that reminds Africans that we have no real partner, and that Africa should actually stop dreaming that one day we'll have a genuine partner who loves us. It won't happen. As long as you're an underdog, it doesn't happen. So even though China is our latter-day friend, Trevor Noah reminds us that Africans better push for much better deals than what we're getting from China, because China is driving its way towards superpower status. So it still has to be predatory, even towards its own so-called African friends.
But maybe it won't come as a surprise that China isn't just giving billions of risky loans to Africa out of the goodness of its heart.
Many scholars suggest Beijing's true endgame in Africa is not solely financial, but rather political.
There is empirical evidence that China has been using these infrastructure investments to affect worldwide politics. It's been found that if an African country recognizes Taiwan as a country, they receive, on average, 2.7 fewer Chinese infrastructure projects within their borders each year. Conversely, if an African country votes overwhelmingly along with China in the United Nations General Assembly, they receive 1.8 more infrastructure projects each year.
At one point or another, 30 African countries have had formal relations with Taiwan. Now Eswatini is the only African nation to recognize the island.
So whoever controls Africa rules the world and will try to hoodwink Africans out of its prized resources. Fact number 2, a beggar cannot be a real partner. So let's wake up, Africans. They want an Africa that will be begging them for assistance for another 1,000 years. But whoever is self-reliant is the one who can be a partner. As long as Africa is not self-reliant, it cannot be a genuine partner to anybody. As long as our leaders go to G7 and G20 carrying the begging bowl or cap, they will never be regarded as true partners by the outside world. Listen to a number of commentators make the point a lot better than I'm making now.
None of you can deny that what I'm saying is the truth. You know it's the truth. But either you won't write it, or you're too cowardly to speak it because you want some favor here or favor there. So because you can't talk, you are muzzled. I'm not. I'm a free black man. And I didn't come here looking for a handout. And I really don't think you need one. Your problem is that you think you need a handout. Everything you need is right under your foot, but you're looking everywhere else for help instead of to yourself and what you can produce for yourself. This is Africa's dilemma. You are parading yourself before the world as international beggars when you gave civilization to the world. Your problem is not America. Your problem is not Israel. Your problem is not Britain. Your problem is your disunity and your dependence on others to do for you what you could do for yourself.
Fact number 3, Africa has continued to rely on the colonial infrastructure, which continues to serve the former colonial masters. This infrastructure has hardly changed. So I've been listening to the argument pushed forward by Guy Udmore, who talks about this rivalry between China and the US and providing an African perspective to the Chinese partnership. And we are going to provide a small clip here on Guy Udmore, but you access his full presentations, you'll be amazed. He's got some brilliant analysis. He argues forcefully that Africa has continued to rely on the colonial infrastructure. We got independence, we're now 60 years down the road, the infrastructure is what the colonials left with us. So that infrastructure, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but my own interpretation is that that infrastructure still better serves the former colonial masters for siphoning out resources, not for local development, because there's still a disconnection infrastructure-wise between the periphery and the capital cities that they built and left for us.
So let's go back. You had wars, disease, debt. Within this context, very few companies, very few in the West looked at Africa as a place to do business. Most of Western policy toward Africa was actually filtered through the lens of development and aid. This was the picture of what was happening in Africa in the year 2000 when China hosted the first forum on China-Africa cooperation, FOCAC. And the FOCAC was held in Beijing. 40 African heads of states and governments were invited. And 2000 happened to be a very fortuitous year because that was the year that China first did its going out policy, when Chinese firms were encouraged to go out to seek access to resources, but to seek access to markets. So when everyone else, and everyone else, I mean the West, saw Africa mainly through the lens of development aid, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, there was still, the Chinese actually saw an opportunity to do business.
So, here at DWP, we're trying to locate a guy you'd move so that maybe one day you will be our guest speaker and talk about this very important topic. Fact number 3, Africa has continued to actually rely on this colonial infrastructure in much more negative ways than what appears at the surface. The message is clear. Maybe China is the better of the two devils, is kind of message I'm getting. And that the Chinese investments may actually be more empowering than those of the Western allies. But you listen to the arguments for yourselves. But in other words, the former colonial masters would rather continue providing development assistance, food aid, and so on, to try and resolve the peripheral issues, rather than actually get Africa to build a fantastic infrastructure that can lead to local development beyond the administrative capitals they built for us before they left. Fact number 4, Africa is the original superpower. So I bring this fact to the table because I know most of you don't believe it. I also know some of you don't even know it. I also know that most of us no longer bother to search the facts. So let me say it again. Africa is actually the original superpower. It's not the last frontier that is being discovered last. It was the first frontier for development. I know it, that we don't believe it, or we don't know it, or we no longer bother to find out who we are, because I've been there myself. Up until I was the age 30, mid-30s, I had visited all parts of the world. And I then realized I should have listened to our own homegrown African wisdom. And if I just hit one of them from my own language, Shona, and it says, Mwana washe muranda kumwe. Translating to, far away from home, one born in royalty is just another commoner. So it's absolutely important to know that you can never be fully accepted as an African anywhere else in the world but Africa. And until Africa is no longer an underdog, may they even start respecting you. But because we don't know our own identity in historical terms, it's a problem. We don't do the Sankofa, looking back as far as we can to gather what we have forgotten, to gather the greatness that we left behind. And by looking as far back as we can, means we can now see forward the furthest. You see, we were trained to think that our history only starts when we were colonized. So obviously, when you do a little Sankofa of just looking back to when you were colonized, the conclusion is that you are an underdog. You have always been an underdog. Africa was never great before. All wrong conclusions based on a limited number of facts which don't tell the full story. So Africa's real poverty is therefore intellectual poverty and spiritual poverty. It's not material poverty. There's no continent as wealthy as Africa, as we already discussed in this segment. Fact number 4, continued. So if we say Africa is the original superpower, let me give you some tips just to begin to scratch the surface. All I'm doing is encouraging you to find out for yourself. Do more research. There's a lot of material on Professor Google's space. You'll be amazed. And now, here's the first tidbit. 7 centuries ago, Africa still holds the record for the richest person in history. Mansa Musa, 700 years ago, was worth $400 billion US. Today's world richest person, Elon Musk, is only worth about 260 billion. Jeff Bezos is about 200 billion, depending on the day. Actually, the chances are that you combine Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk today, they might actually well, they might slightly more than 400 billion today, but the difference would be that Mansa Musa's wealth was real wealth. It was not based on the stock exchange. It was real material wealth. But who knows where Tesla is and Jeff Bezos' worth? They can collapse depending on the stock market of the day to less than 400 billion. The Ashanti in Ghana, Songhai, in Benin, Mali, the great Zimbabwe empires, and many, many others were actually as developed as their contemporaries anywhere else in the world at that time. And historians who do the proper Sankofa will argue, and they do argue, convincing that sub-Saharan Africa was relatively wealthy and technologically advanced until at least the 17th century. So the other issue was, unlike Europe, Africa's technological advancements were much more to do with humanity and human development, whereas Europeans emphasized the physical attributes of development, emphasizing capacity to mete out violence more than anything else. So when they started violently attacking Africa, Africa was not prepared. But just to say the final point here, it is wrong to perceive Africa as the kind of last frontier for development today. It was actually the very first. So those are the facts. We'll come back in the next segment to then discuss exactly what this means and put some interpretations and also look at a few other views around it. Thank you. On this issue of who needs who and who is Africa's real partners, what is our analysis now that we have gotten the facts? First thing is to really emphasize the point that a weak and disunited and unstable Africa is the dream of any potential superpower or a pretender to the superpower status. They love it. They get up every morning, and the first thing they check is to ensure that the Africans are still asleep and disunited and unstable. Then they know they're most likely going to control Africa and therefore be able to run this world. So let's just bring a bit of closure to how Africa got into this situation where the economy still remains poor, and that although historically Africa had a number of fairly advanced civilizations, what led to the current situation? Well, it simply is through European colonization and later on the Cold Wars. These continue to create three situations which we should always focus on, which cause our situation in Africa. That is political instability, economic backwardness, and social instability. The good news, however, is that since 1994 or so, Africans have really significantly improved their attempts to unite and to be able to solve on economic and political issues. And it's really been a massive improvement. It may not look like it, but you may be surprised when you actually look at the facts. Let me give you a few simple facts that just dissolve some of the kind of negative emotions we Africans have about Africa. Let's look at improvement in governance. You know, if you go back to 1994, you'd probably find there were maybe 5, 6 former heads of states or government in the whole continent, you know, because Africa had for some time been run by dictatorships for a time. Today, there's more than 40 former heads of states and government on the continent, people who were democratically elected into government and left democratically. So although you may feel like we still have very poor governance, because the fact that massive improvements take place does not mean to say you're going to feel that way, because it's like pulling somebody out of a deep hole. If they're 20 meters under, you pull them, and now they're only 2 meters from the surface. They're still not out of the surface. So emotionally, you still don't see that massive progress has taken place. Same applies to economic progress. Massive improvements after Africans threw away the forced structural adjustment programs on them by the IMF and World Bank. Today, Africans are managing their economies much better. They discuss economic issues across regions much better, and that's why they're able to improve even the common trade area agreements, as we'll discuss in deeper terms in future sessions. So it is important also to realize that Africa is a place where our partners, the so-called international community, really is not interested in African people per se. They're interested in African resources. The focus is not on African people. So we have no partner who really focuses on African people. We only have partners who focus on African resources. We already covered this in the first session. With 30% of the world's known minerals, with 65% of the world's arable land, with 10% of the world's freshwater, renewable freshwater resources, no doubt they all want to control Africa. So whoever has access to these resources, whoever can get them for a song or at a stroke of a pen today, whoever actually kind of easily would go around the weak governmental structures and whoever can do all the above and even get away without paying much taxes on the continent, whoever can do those things, and also taking advantage of the fact that Africans are psychologically defeated for a long time, only trying to wake up now. All the above means that whoever can control these resources stands a brilliant chance of ruling the world. So it's a pity that our partners don't focus on us as African people, but rather than that, focus on resources. But then it's good for us to know we are on our own. It's good for Africans to know that they will never truly love us. They will never truly collaborate with us, because whatever collaborative agreements between Africa and the rest of the world, they still are based on you are the underdog. You are poor because it's your problem. And increasingly we are told it's only through trade and aid. And we have already discussed why those are not going to solve the problem. Deep down, they fear you as an African, because African people, not our material resources, African people as people are an amazing, deep, unknown quantity. Europeans got scared of Africans because Africans are just too deep for them. Africans always knew that. the spiritual and the physical world are one and the same thing, and know that ultimately those who master this are going to be the ones who are going to develop the most advanced civilizations. Now, they muzzled that for the last 200-300 years, but it's just a sleeping giant. It's waking up. So until we start respecting ourselves, until we start believing in ourselves, until we start building self-reliance, they're not going to respect us. That is why in this segment, we can conclude by saying, you go out there, continue to study and search what scholars and commentators say about who are Africa's true partners. Go and look out there and search for who is who. Does Africa really need anybody to develop? All those issues are well covered by many commentators, and we need to go back and study those material more deeply. And we will also try to get some of those thought leaders on our program as our guests in future. So please be back for the third and final segment. Welcome back to the last segment as we look at the departure points. The first departure point is to emphasize that we really are on our own. We are our own true partners. Through disunity, we were enslaved. Through disunity, we were colonized. It follows, therefore, that we cannot be united based on their benevolence or based on the intellectual mindsets that they left with us. We can only unite truly on an African basis. Otherwise, the African Union will still be another weak body that they manipulate. So we have to go back to the self-reliance argument. It starts with each of the 55 African countries better understanding how to be more self-reliant and how collectively as African Union we become more self-reliant. Now, self-reliance is not an argument for isolation from the world. As a matter of fact, self-reliance just means that you are able to stand on your own 2 feet, and when you partner or collaborate with others, you have a base to go back to. You don't have to be intimidated all the time. That's what self-reliance means. It doesn't mean we isolate ourselves. It means skills for partnering and collaboration in all the weight divisions. We'll start small because we are economically a weakling, we're a lightweight. But we have to learn how to survive and stand our ground and be able to negotiate better deals even in the lightweight divisions with other smaller countries of the world. You know, South Korea, Vietnam, you can go to Europe, Belgium. There are lots of lightweights who pose as more capable than Africa. So even in that division, we can still be self-reliant. We can go all the way up to the heavyweight divisions. There's absolutely lots that Africans can do to stand our ground faced with China, faced with the United States, faced with the European Union as a bloc. As I said already, our biggest challenge is intellectual poverty and spiritual poverty. It's not the material poverty. We can build self-reliance very, very quickly. And all it takes is the boldness and courage to do it. I mean, for instance, just to get a bit more respect as Africans on this continent, all it takes is the African Union, the 55 heads of states, meeting just for 1 hour or even less, and drafting a resolution which says, we Africans, this is our message to the rest of the world. You do injury to one African or a person of African descent, you do injury to all of us. If you do so, you will hear from us. We don't care if you are the world's superpower or another underdog. We will make sure that it will be difficult for you to do business on this continent if you harm any one of us. I mean, that's all it takes. And let all the 55 heads of state sign that declaration and send it out to all the capitals of the world. I can guarantee you the following day, you're going to see more respect for Africans. Because if that resolution is enforced as a collective, it will work. But if we continue to individually try to go to Paris and Washington and negotiate our own deals, we know that you're not going to win. So the self-reliance argument is not one for isolation. It is one that makes it possible for us to fight, to collaborate, or whatever in any weight divisions. So Africa can actually do much better on our own. After all, many countries with less than 1% of Africa's resources are doing better than us. So if a Bangladesh, which has less than 1% of Africa's resources, if it can do better manufactured export performance in the apparel industry with the United States, they do 5 times more than all of Africa combined together. But they have less than 1% of Africa's resources. It follows, therefore, that a united Africa can do better than almost anybody. I mean, you look at South Korea as an example. You know, they also less than 1% of Africa's resources, but they're a huge global player in the trading business. So we should just go back to common sense. We are consumed too much by these esoteric arguments. We listen to too much television, too much CNN and BBC just reinforces the idea that we can never unite, we can never do it. So we need actually to just remind ourselves that all global players who have done better than us in all weight divisions, all of them, they have no resources anywhere close to what Africa has. The third point in conclusion is that Africa should prioritize those partners who are interested in African people, not just the resources. It's a shame that we Africans continue to lick their boots, continue to pretend that we like them, when in actual fact, we know they don't like us. You know, Africa should prioritize partners who are not fixated on our resources, but rather truly want to collaborate and know us as Africans much better. They will never truly love you. Don't even waste your time. They will never truly collaborate with you on an equal basis as long as you're an underdog. Whether it's through aid or trade, deep down, they fear you as an African because Africans are deep, unknown quantities, sleeping giants, and they're afraid one day we'll wake up. So that's why they're scared of Africans. The moment Africans, we start respecting ourselves, we will become more self-reliant. We have to plan for these things decades and decades ahead of time. Africa, that controls Africa, will be the next superpower after China. So the African Union, all its regional economic blocs, SADC, ECOWAS, COMESA, we start planning now for when we take over as the next superpower. As of today, The US is still ahead. China is on the winning path to take over from the US. And as long as they continue to control our resources, we will still be the underdog. But soon as the cat is out of the bag now, so we need our strategists to focus on the world after China. And there are already many commentators and scholars. I will show you a small clip from one of those who explain about Africa after China and how Africa is already beginning to learn how to take over after China.
To help create jobs for their growing populations, African governments are faced with a decision.
Spider mite.
Some think the quickest path out of poverty is to copy China, to industrialize rapidly, giving workers jobs in factories. Others reason that since China already dominates manufacturing, the best bet is to do something else. Some see opportunities in services, such as IT, and industries without smokestacks, such as horticulture. Regardless of the route Africans take, they need to invest in technology.
These ideas just have to be mainstreamed, taken more seriously, at the highest level, fearlessly and boldly. So in conclusion, whoever controls Africa runs this world. And Africa that controls Africa is the next undisputed superpower after USA and China. But it has to be an Africa that mass produces its own raw materials and mass manufactures its own raw materials and then mass consumes its own manufactured goods and services before we even worry about exporting. Then we won't be addicted to the US dollar and other world currencies. It has to be an Africa conscious to the fact that it does not have any real partners now. None out there. Rather, we are our own best real partners. It has to be an Africa that is self-reliant, not isolated, self-reliant, and a serious global player in all matters of humanity. Thank you. See you in the next session.